Where we left off in our last video, we had just finished talking about cellular respiration. Cellular respiration, when oxygen is used, is called aerobic respiration. Okay, it's creating ATP, creating energy using oxygen. You can also do this anaerobically, meaning you don't use oxygen, with a process called fermentation. After glycolysis, if oxygen is present, then the pyruvic acid goes into the Krebs cycle. If oxygen is not present at the time of glycolysis, then that pyruvic acid gets broken down by fermentation. Fermentation is the same type of process as respiration, where energy is released from food molecules. It's just anaerobic. It's in an absence of oxygen. So during fermentation, we still convert those electron carriers, and then fermentation produces NAD plus, the electron carrier, which allows glycolysis to continue. So fermentation is going to release those electrons so that glycolysis can keep moving. If the electron carriers weren't released so that glycolysis could continue in the absence of oxygen, all metabolism would stop. Your body would stop using food to create energy, and bad things would happen. There's two types of fermentation. You have alcoholic and lactic acid fermentation. Alcoholic is done by organisms such as yeast, which is in bread, and they take they take glucose, create carbon dioxide and ethyl alcohol as their products. So when you're making bread and you put yeast in the bread, it's eating the sugars in the dough. It's creating carbon dioxide and ethyl alcohol as byproducts, and those carbon dioxide bubbles are what gives you the holes in your bread. The alcohol actually burns off in the process of baking. So here's your chemical equation. Remember, glycolysis lets off pyruvic acid and NADH from the electron carrier. In alcoholic fermentation, after this reaction, it produces alcohol, carbon dioxide, and NAD plus, which can go back to glycolysis to create more pyruvic acid. So like I said, this is why bread rises, and all of the alcohol produced while making bread is burnt off in the process of baking. Lactic acid fermentation is what your cells do. So in your cells, the pyruvic acid that's broken down from glycolysis is going to be converted to lactic acid. Just like alcoholic fermentation, it's going to release those electrons so the electron carrier can go back to glycolysis. So here's your equation. Pyruvic acid and NADH, your full electron carrier, comes in, and what's created is lactic acid and NAD plus. This is what is happening to you when you're exercising. So think about if you're running a marathon. When you're running, you're using a lot of energy, and your body isn't bringing in as much oxygen as it needs to create energy to keep you going. So your body goes into this lactic acid fermentation, where pyruvic acid from glycolysis is broken down into lactic acid and NAD plus. Both types of fermentation happen in the cytoplasm. They do not happen in the mitochondria. So that's another difference between those. In this unit, we also want to touch on plants, plant parts, what plants are doing. Okay, so plants have to have water. We all know that if you don't water your plant is going to die. We have to water it to keep photosynthesis going. And the water has to get from the roots to all the different places of the plant. Why is water needed to keep photosynthesis going? Well, remember, water has to be broken down so that we can release that hydrogen to help with the electron carriers. Okay, the xylem in plants allows plants to move materials up the plant. Xylem is a plant tissue that moves water and nutrients from the roots of the plant to everything else that's further up the plant. So in trees, it's moving it from the roots in the ground up to the leaves in the sky, okay? The flowers in the ground, same thing. It's moving everything from the roots up. Xylem moves everything up. Vocab word, you just have to know xylem moves water and nutrients up the plant. If we were to take a cross section of a plant and look under a microscope, this is what we would see. This big hole right here is xylem. Okay, it is going to move things up the plant. As you get further up into your biology career, you're going to learn all these fun little terms here. For now, you need to know that xylem moves water and nutrients up the plant. Phloem is the other type of tube. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. So water moves up the plant against gravity, and it does this because of adhesion and cohesion. Okay, we talked about that in Unit 1. Cohesion is when two substances that are the same stick together. Adhesion is when two substances that are different stick together. So what's happening is in your leaves, you have these tiny little pores called stomata, and stomata help regulate the amount of water in the leaf. So on a very dry or a very hot day, those stomata, those little holes in the leaves, are actually going to close so that your plant doesn't lose a whole lot of water. On a very rainy or humid day, those stomata will open so that water can move in and out of the leaf. Now, those stomata don't provide enough water coming into the leaf to have that be their only source. The water still has to come from the roots and move up the xylem. But what happens is as that water is lost, and remember, your plant cells are doing cellular respiration as well, so they are creating some excess water as well. So some of that water has to be lost. As it's lost, it needs to be replaced though. So because water sticks together due to cohesion, that water is going to move up the xylem. Also, water is going to stick to the sides of the xylem due to adhesion. Okay. Transpiration, all this words mean is when plants lose water due to evaporation. So once your leaves do the photosynthesis and they create glucose, there are cells in the roots that are dividing. They're undergoing mitosis. We know that during the cell cycle that the cells need to grow, synthesize DNA, grow again before they can undergo mitosis. So they're going to need nutrients. So the glucose that's being produced by the chloroplasts in the leaf need to move back down to the roots. They move down with the phloem. The phloem is just tissue that takes sugar and other nutrients down the plant. Xylem up, phloem down. Here's another picture. Same picture as before here, xylem and phloem. Here you can just see a cross section of phloem. This is what you would see under a microscope. That is the PowerPoint lecture for Unit 3. Please remember, if you have questions, watch this video again, watch it as many times as you need, or please ask me in class, send me an email through my website, but get your questions answered. They are definitely important, and I'm here to help you. Thanks, and good luck.